Okay, that being said, I will officially call to order the special meeting of the Royal Oak Downtown Development Authority for February 24th, 2021. We will do, I see Director Luan is with us. We will do a roll call vote at this time. Please indicate your presence and your location, if you would, please. Director Rosbeck.
Here, Royal Oak.
And Director Yazbek.
Here, Royal Oak.
Director Keith.
Here, Troy.
Director Riley.
Here, Royal Oak.
Director Luan.
Here, Royal Oak.
Director Brake.
Present in Royal Oak.
And I am also present and in Royal Oak. For the record, Director London is not with us. Okay, moving on. We have one agenda item for today. Oh, we have public. Is there any public comment? Tim, Carol, anybody?
There was no public comment called in today.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item number 4, our only item, Centennial Commons. Tim, being the executive director, I guess lead us in on this, and then we'll go from there.
Mr. Brake actually drafted the cover memo, so I think
Okay.
jump right into that. So.
Okay, so Mr. Brake, tell us why we're here today.
All right. Well, thank you. So I sent the cover memorandum to you yesterday that included a couple of reports from our construction consultants that advising us. So getting really to the bottom line is there's a difference of 1.4, 1.5 million if you add in a contingency to complete the park as envisioned. I have the different dollar amounts that are delineated, which includes the original recommended amount that came from the infrastructure committee. And then there was an additional adjustment that came from our construction consultant. Then upon further review, the construction consultant from Plant Moran Cressa is advising that we need to increase the contingency amount. So I included that for additional consideration. Taking a larger view of why we're here and what this is all about, and I spent a fair amount of time talking about this in the cover memorandum, and this part is important, is that we're talking about placemaking. Placemaking is a form of economic development. And especially as we look at moving forward the downtown area to revitalize Royal Oak as a whole, to appeal and attract a knowledge economy. And I want to emphasize that in the grand scheme of things, that's what's really important. That's what the vote entails here, is do we carry out the park plan that's envisioned? There's no new sort of design. This has been contemplated for the last 2-3 years of what this park consists of. From my understanding, and of course, much of this discussion and the plans of the park took place prior to my arrival. But I can say that there was the due diligence from the input from the community, from a variety of stakeholders that helped support the expense of this fund. Of course, since we're in the middle of a pandemic and accelerated costs and delays because of litigation, and there's a variety of reasons, we are where we are. And unfortunately, the original placeholder budget was not sufficient. This dollar amount that was derived was determined before the park was designed. And now we're looking at plugging a hole here. from what I understand, that the overall concept, the design is something that you all desire. This is something that the city commission desires. And certainly the community supports this and the amenities that are included as part of the park. So I wanted to start out with that and really take this from a 30,000 foot view. Why are we here and why are we discussing this? As I indicated, based on the action that's taken at this meeting, that I will bringing this to the city commission at their next regular meeting on March 8th, and not only to report the findings of whatever the determination is here, but I have included additional items to launch a public relations campaign, to look at reducing the municipal expenses, and then finally creating a even greater partnership with the DDA as we look at the Henry Ford Health System, the sponsorship agreement. So that's the broad overview. If there's questions that get into the specific numbers, how did we arrive at them? Why are the changes and when did they occur? We have Chris Becker, who is with Plant Moran Cressa, who's been advising us from the beginning of the construction process, and also Tom Anderson, who is with Colasani O'Brien Joint Venture Group, who is the construction manager that has been working on the Royal Oak Civic Center project. So with that, I'll pause and turn it back to Tim, or if there's get this directly into questions.
Okay, thank you. I know we have a number of different questions here. One of the things I quickly wanted to get into, if we could, and I don't know if this question's for Mr. Brake or Chris or Tom, but in our previous discussions and Zoom meetings and infrastructure meetings, we hadn't, the contingency factor wasn't brought into the discussion until we saw this document from Mr. Brake. So I guess I would appreciate if one of you could tell us how we got there, how we arrived at this amount, what it's exactly entitles and what it's for. I think some of the board members would like a better explanation of that if we could get it.
I believe that would be input from me.
Okay.
In trying to get this project as close to the budget as possible to get numbers down, we took the normally we would have about 5% owner contingency on a project to cover all the unknowns that you get into underground and additional items along that line that are unknown and come across. But to get it closer to the budget, we had some discussion and we reduced that contingency, the owner contingency, to 2.5%. If we're going out, it makes sense to have 5% contingency. Some of my people even think that because we have a large amount of underground work here, where your biggest risk on a project is typically underground, you just don't know what's down there. And frankly, folks, Royal Oak's got this wonderful sand, but we did some testing of that sand and it actually has some naturally occurring chemicals in it that we had to haul off a lot of sand off the parking deck and off the police station because we can't, we had to haul off and take it to a class 2 landfill because of those naturally occurring substances like strontium in it. But with that said, we had reduced the owner retainage, City of Royal Oaks, not retainage, contingency to 2.5% to get closer to the budget. We're suggesting that you maintain a 5% contingency, and that's what that $99,000 is, going from a 2.5% owner contingency to a 5% owner contingency.
Okay, so that's the extra 2.5% that's Not on the books?
That's correct.
Okay. And then Mr. Brake, if you could explain in part of the resolution that you put together, you state, be it further resolved that the board authorize an additional $99,279 in an increased contingency only in the event such funding is subsequently requested and approved. I guess I'm looking, I understand that, but I'm looking at procedurally here. Are you suggesting in this resolution that you or somebody else would be coming back to the DDA should the contingency factor come into play for further authorization?
That is correct, but at least that we understand that up front. But if we don't need the money, then we're not going to take it. But at least if we have that understanding that we have that dollar amount out there, and like Chris indicated, we'll know early on in the process that when the earth moving occurs, that if they've come across these chemicals beneath the ground that need to be disposed of. It's if we get further on the project and it's all clean soil, we don't need it, we're not going to come back and ask for that.
Okay. Okay. I'll hold off the rest of my comments for later. I'm ready to open up to the floor, to the board here. I see
Can you
Director
just
Ryan.
Sorry, can you clarify that, Mike, again? Is, the 99 is not the addition to go from 2.5 to 5, or is it?
It is.
Okay,
The 99,279 is the amount to go from 2.5% to 5%.
okay.
Correct.
Just
All right, I got a couple questions.
Director Riley.
Yeah, I'm making a couple questions. I'm going to start with the 99. I'm a little confused between what Mr. Brake and Chair Sophia said with regard to the 99. The way it looks to me is that the way the resolution is written is that if we approve it, that the 99 is already approved, and if they need it, they take it. Is that not correct? Do they have to come back to the board for further approval?
The latter.
They do have to come back to the board for further approval.
Yes.
Okay, so it's just, is that just sort of a placeholder, if you will, Mr. Brake?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. What I don't want to do is here's the thing. I don't like surprises, and I'm sure none of you do. And so if I come back and they say, well, why didn't you tell us that could be a potential? I'm just making that known so it's entered into the record.
Okay, and now on that same issue, any offset of the permit fees, would that fall under, would that come out, would that fall into the owner's contingency, if you will? In other words, in your 3 point, if I'll call it sort of DDA help, if you will, on number 2 there, if there is an offset there, will that decrease the likelihood that we would need to pony anything up for the contingencies?
Yes, we could arrange that.
Okay, we
Yes.
could arrange that. Okay, the next question is first paragraph, the 1.456 mil. I'm assuming that includes the restrooms as well.
That is correct. And
Okay.
and it's actually, if you add in the 99,000, it's really 1.5. If
Correct.
you want to talk about the total.
Okay, now I'm just gonna brush briefly on as I said, I'll call them the 3 DDA points, which is on page 3 of Mr. Brake's write-up. The PR campaign, while I understand and appreciate that, I believe that our concern, I know I spoke with members within the Business Marketing Committee, and our concern mainly is more with the businesses. It's also with the residents, don't get me wrong, but it's more with the businesses. And instead, I'll just speak my piece. Instead of spending money and going out with an RFP and a PR campaign to appease them, I would just like to, I'd rather have the money to help them when they need it, and more money to put into the alley, which is going to be our big nut coming up the next 2 years. On number 2, I already addressed that. Number 3, I definitely appreciate that. It's a little bit vague, in my opinion, but I think it's incredibly equitable that we should at least share in the sponsorship coming from Henry Ford Health Systems. I'm not quite sure the way this is written, what our sharing will be, if it's something that, we're gonna have a committee and mutually agree upon how to spend the money. In other words, will it be for Christmas lights in the park or stuff related to the park. I think it's a good idea, but I'm not going to put words in your mouth.
Yeah, so let's be careful about that. So those funds are set aside for maintenance of the park. It's not for things above and beyond. Over time, the park will need those, repairs and the like. And so what will happen is those dollars will likely be set aside in some sort of retainage that later on, when you're talking 5 to 7 years down the road, when the first significant repairs need to be done. So this is not a over, above and beyond. But this is the commitment that I'm making to you, that I'm the one that's telling you, and I'll describe that also to the commission as well, because this is a brand new source of funds and hasn't been utilized, but the agreement is pretty specific in what its intended use is. So I can tell you that from past experience and in a previous conversation with many of you, that I did a similar park project in the last last community where I worked, and the overall budget was a similar amount. And it was an existing park that was about 20, 25 years old. After a while, park starts to look pretty tired. And, and so you need to put those sort of costs back into it. But I think there needs to be a regular dialogue, on an annual basis of checking in with the, it'd be having Mr. Filipski from DPS sitting down with the infrastructure committee, how's the park doing? What sort of maintenance things that we have, and especially if we have this water feature, that's another thing that we have to maintain. There may be issues where after a while the thing gets gummed up, and so where you're going to want to sit down with Aaron and say, Aaron, how we doing? How's the park holding up? And I think we need to have that regular communication with the DDA board. I think you deserve that information. So that's why I included that as part of that 3-point bullet.
Okay, and the last thing, the last question slash thing that I'll add
Mhm.
is, with that in mind, could we also put into there that any other future sponsorships get the same treatment? In other words, let's say, a year down the road, we are able to get somebody to sponsor the water feature, or we do get somebody to sponsor adding a bathroom or something like that, where we're involved in that as well, in future sponsorships.
Yeah, I would say as far as giving input to how those dollars are utilized, yeah, I don't see why not. So.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, who else? Anybody? Questions? Okay, I see Director Yazbek.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to understand, I think it's important for all of us to understand the numbers. I understand the 462,935. That's the difference between the money we have to spend and the base bid budget, correct?
Correct.
And then there's a 66,245. That's the difference between moving from the low bidder to the second low bidder.
That is in the instance if we construct the water features. So that's an additional amount that's needed. And that amount has changed since the last week. It was $59,000, and now the 66. That includes the contingency amount added to it, if that makes sense.
Yes. And then we talked about the 99,000 for the owner's contingency that was removed from, that was, I guess, value engineered, and now we're putting it back.
Yeah, well, in essence, we talked about the prospect of if we can reduce the municipal fees, the building permit fees, and plug that in lieu of that. So that question was asked earlier. I don't know if it was Director Riley or who brought that up, but that's certainly where we could plug in any of those dollars that we save in that line item. Absolutely, we move them over to the contingency.
All right. So those, I think we have a good understanding of all those What I don't understand entirely is the amount for alternate one. And it's important, I think, because my understanding from the infrastructure committee and our discussion last week was that anything that the DDA considers is going to be contingent upon the city commission approving funding the alternate one water feature.
That is correct.
So I'm looking at that number and I'm just, it's in the Plant Moran Cressa letter, it referenced the $698,000 figure for alternate one. And when I look at the bid of the second lowest bidder, that was a $238,000 increase or $306,000 bid. So I for one don't understand how we leap from 238 or 306 to the 698.
That's a good question. So the 306 is the amount related to Canon for the landscape company. The other amount to bring it to the 600 and whatever is the cost of the trades. So those are two separate bids. So regardless, so you have two different contractors that are working on that. But that as it relates to the underground components that are in there, that it's related to the landscaping company only is that 306. But you still need electricians and like, and I'll turn that over to either Chris or Tom to explain how we arrive at that $600,000 amount for the water feature alone.
Mr. Brake, let me ask you a question. Well, the way I originally understood it was that the lower alternate one bid, which was Heritage, which was the $68,000, that it was out of their scope, so they couldn't do it. So if we had to go, if we were insisting on the water feature, then it now moves to Canon, where you have like I'm going to call it, for lack of a better term, a $250,000 jump in the alternate bid. But there's also, it looks like there's also a substantial jump in the base bid. Are those numbers included in the base bid for the?
No, that would still be related to the alternate. So that feature includes, like I said, there are additional contractors, and it might be plural, and it looks like Tom's ready to speak up, that the trades that would be working with Canon to install the water feature. The combination of Canon plus the trades equals the $698,536. And Tom, can you help me out, the trades that we're working with Canon?
Yeah, Paul, sorry about that. That's correct. So, there's earthwork involved. So there'd be the earthwork contractors right around 56,000. You have concrete, additional concrete work for the pits and different things like that for the fountain, which is right around $142,000. Value carpentries, almost $56,000. Additional plumbing, the water feature right there is 306. Electrical, you got 17,200 in there. So yeah, there's lots of different trades involved in the water feature. It's just not the landscaper itself. The landscaping portion, the landscaping bid was the bid that we had the problem with, that we had the bust with the low, quote unquote, the low bid with Heritage, is that they only carried, when we went out to bid, we wrote scopes of work, and we said, okay, if you're a landscaper, these are all the things that we want you to include in your scope of work when you bid the project. Unfortunately, Heritage, when they bid it, they decided that, well, we want to bid the project, but we don't want to bid this, and they cross that line item out, and they cross the next line item out, and things like that. Well, that makes it very difficult for us to compare apples to apples across the board. Canon had a complete scope coverage. They went and they did exactly what we asked them to do, provided the numbers for the items that were provided in the landscaping scope, Heritage didn't do that, and that was the disparity between the two. Originally, when we looked at it and the project came in over budget, the idea was, okay, we do value engineering. If we get rid of alternate number one, we have no reason to kick Heritage bid out. So their number was a certain number, okay? If we go with the water feature, now we have to kick Heritage. His bid is no longer valid because they didn't follow the scope of work that was in that portion of the project. I don't know if I over-explained that or if I got it too complicated for everyone, but so that's kind of how we came to this. But there are different aspects of the water. In the water feature, there are different trades involved. There wasn't just the landscaping trade. The landscaper was the trade that had the bust in it, looking at the alternate numbers.
So in Cannon's $306,000 bid for the water feature, what you're saying is that's primarily just the physical, actual water feature and the landscaping around it then?
Correct. So that's the equipment. So in their scope of work, they had the equipment that went into the water feature, the pumps and different things like that. There's a specialty contractor that just handles the actual water feature plumbing, for lack of better terms. And then they also had there's pavers that are part of that system. So they had that as well in their scope of work. So yeah, there's different aspects of that water feature that they had that nobody else had, but there are other trades involved in the construction of that water feature.
So
Okay.
Tom, I'm
Director
just
Rossback,
trying,
go ahead. Yeah.
sorry, thank
ahead.
you. Just trying to understand then, though, but if you kick Heritage out, your base bid though goes up, I just did simple math, about $250,000 for additional base bid, 258,057. I did the math. That's the increase between the two. And then you add in this water feature. So I'm just adding alternate one. I'm only coming up to 564. Where's the 698 coming from? I guess I'm like Director Yesbeck. I'm not following where that 698 is adding up.
Okay.
I don't have what Paul sent.
So, well, I can
Okay.
share it. I don't know. We've never shared screens, but I could share it on the screen if you wanted to.
This is where I get to add in a little bit. If you went in the backup, there's a Plant Moran letter attached. And if you go to, I believe, page 6 of that, near the bottom, summary of potential cost impacts. And if you look at the ad for the water feature, that's where it says 698,536. And it has a couple of little footnotes to it. Footnote number 4 says, if alternate number 1 is accepted, the apparent low responsible landscaping contractor changes to the WH Cannon, and this increase includes all costs to change the contractors. That's $632,291 for alternate number 1. And then we didn't have a good place to put the other portion in, which is that $66,245, which you have to increase the base contract amount, which is the $59,910 with the markups and the contingency. So
Yeah, I guess, but it looks based on your, so that, I guess that's where I was getting confused, because I'm looking at your footnotes and you're adding owner contingency in a few different places. And so unless, are we adding additional contingencies into the water feature?
I'm not, but
Because
remember, the base owner contingency was the 2.5%. And that first 2.5% is on plus some of the fees for the CM are on the $59,500, which is added then to the $632,000 to come up to the 698.
So if you look at that added, so just to clarify, I have add alternative number 1, water feature. Footnote 2 says PMC strongly recommends the owner contingency to be increased to minimum of 5%. That's
Yeah.
not the same 99,000 we're talking about?
The note number 2, you're right, is to that $99,000 increase in the owner's contingency to 5%. We have not added that money, to
Into that line item?
yeah, into the alternate number 1. We have not. The whole increase to go to 5% from 2.5 is all in that 99,279.
Because I get the 632 number for alternate number 1.
Mhm.
So I do get that when you look at footnote number 4, that's the number I get as a final number for alternate number 1. It's the 632,291. I do not get the 63,758.
So I can maybe try to explain that a little bit better.
Okay,
So Heritage was the apparent low without the alternate.
right.
If we go with the alternate, we can't just hire Canon to do the alternate and Heritage to do the base bid. They won't do that.
Correct.
So we have to eliminate Heritage, okay, and eliminate their bid and go with the second bidder, which was Canon, as the base bid. And their cost was $63,000, $63,754 more than Heritage on the base bid. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I get $258,057 additional to the base bid.
I think we're looking at value engineered items. Is that correct, Chris?
Yeah.
I'm looking at the bid results. I'm just taking 1.2 subtracting 990.
Right, but that was before we did value engineering, before we reduced some landscaping, before we reduced some other things. We changed some stuff. We changed the amount of concrete. We did some various value engineering.
Okay, so yeah, it looks like you got about 59,000 out of it, but that still would be then a $200,000 additional to the base bid. Unless I'm reading this really wrong. I mean,
You might be, because the add to the base bid, and I got to get the Paul's letter. Excuse me, I got onto the wrong one. Paul's letter kind of goes over, there it is. Goes over pretty clear. The amount needed to go to the base bid is just that 66,245. If we go with alternate number 1, we have to add 66,245. That's it.
okay. And okay.
Just to bring it back around after all that, because it is incredibly confusing. I mean, a lot of us have looked at these to the point that our heads start swimming. And like I mentioned to Mr. Bragg, I can imagine you jumping in the middle of this thing when you were hired on. But so the bringing it back to the nuts and bolts, the city is looking for the 462 that had been before the infrastructure committee, as well as an additional 66,000.
Correct.
And then to just kind of put out there that there's a possible of a $99,000, which is basically doubling the owner's contingency from 2.5% to 5%.
Correct.
That you want us to be aware of could become an issue.
Mhm.
And the one thing that I don't see here, and if it is here, I apologize, is the portion the city is going to pick up the water feature portion, which I know is north of $600,000. Mr. Brake, do you have that number?
I do. So that is 698,536.
Okay. All right. So just if I can sort of clarify things and you guys tell me if I'm out, but
Yeah, and one more thing, just real quickly, if I can interrupt. on my document, on the second page, it's second to last full paragraph, where I say that, hey, I'm putting up the recommendation
Right.
to the city commission. So you have that in writing.
Okay. And I think, and I don't, I guess, I don't want to speak for the infrastructure committee or the rest of the board, but I believe that the infrastructure committee and what they had brought forward to the board initially at the last meeting that we basically never got around to. But Chair Sophia, correct me if I'm wrong, we were going to base that contingent upon the city covering the full amount of the water feature. Is that correct?
Oh, that was correct. Yeah, that was before all of these meetings and everything else too. I think what the flavor of the infrastructure committee was at that time was that we knew that the residents, wanted the water feature. It was the number one thing on their list. It's the thing that everybody's been talking about. And if we're going to put more money into the project than what we already had, we wanted some assurances that the water feature wouldn't be an alternate or a budgeted way to make this thing come under budget. So we wanted some, I don't want to use the word guarantee. I'm not sure that that's the right word, but we wanted some assurances that this was that. And I think in some of the discussions with individual city commissioners, I think they're on that path. I believe that's what they have said it, and I believe them. They take their word at it, that they understand what an important feature that it is. Again, I think we were just looking for a little safeguard there to possibly put in the resolution. But I also understand the fact that Mr. Brake has to present this to the commission.
Sure.
Right.
Before he can really guarantee us anything.
Right. But and I guess my only question is that I would assume that we would do the same thing and the members of the infrastructure committee are sitting here and I'll listen to your recommendation, but I would assume that we would do the same thing and make ours contingent upon theirs. It's a partnership.
Yeah. So, Mr. Chair, if I may add.
Yeah, go ahead. Mr.
So keep in mind, as I mentioned before, the time frame that we are moving forward. So we have the city commission meeting on March 8th. The bids expire March 15th. So this isn't anything that's going to be long and drawn out. So I anticipate that the city commission will take action. Here's the other kind of time consideration that is really weighing on their mind. We want to get this done this year. We want to get it done possibly by the end of summer. By any additional delay or different contemplation, this no longer is the Centennial Park. It's the Centennial +1. It pushes us into 2022. So there's a strong desire to not only get this done, but get it done right. That's a message I've heard this consistently throughout.
Okay, Director Riley?
Oh, no, I was adjusting my light. But
okay, I'm sorry.
Chairman Sophia?
Yes, Director Rosbeck.
I don't want to add more to this, but I think part of our resolution for this park was also the terrace, and I want to make sure, have we looked at those numbers as well?
What do you mean the library terrace?
Yeah, because I thought we agreed to the funding of that so that all of it could get done at once.
I guess I'll go to Mr. Becker, we did put in an additional $1.5 million so that this could all be done as one project as opposed to a project to be put off later.
And I can tell you that library terrace is included in the full scope of work of the park.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Director Riley?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Director Rosbeck, that's a really good point because although I know the 1.5 was included in the quote unquote terrace, there was something that I think Mr. Twing had in the package with regard to the library that is outside of the scope of this work, if I'm not mistaken. And that's something for another day, but it's just something
Correct.
out there. Okay? All right.
Yeah. No, I wanted to talk about the terrace project because that came up as a different phase. The DDA decided to tackle that all together last year. And so I wanted to make sure that, you know, the numbers on that project have been looked at and have been, you know, are we going to find ourselves in a similar situation with that 1.5? That's, I guess, was my concern. I didn't, if this, but as long as Mr. Becker is saying it's part of this project and they've looked at those numbers and we're not at risk for that money to be over budget, I feel comfortable.
Good, thank you.
I just want to add that library platform is included in the total park scope of work. So your $1.5 million that you brought in last year did just that. It got the park where we're building the whole thing all at one time.
Thank you.
Phase two, it's all phased together.
Director Riley.
Yeah, the last thing I'm going to say is that I'm going to, I think that the infrastructure committee, you know, had agreed to recommend the initial 462. Now basically what it is, it's an additional 66 with the potential of the 99 down the road. But again, that'll be a separate item. You know, in return, we've got some public relations going on. We're hoping that the permits, something can be done with that, which will help on the owner's contingency. And then the ability to work with the city on the sponsorship money down the road. So, you know, and again, I do firmly believe that anything that we do is contingent upon the city approving and agreeing to covering, you know, the 698,000 for the water feature. So I guess I'll turn it over to the infrastructure committee.
Yeah, I just want to add, I want to add one point in that Mr. Brake already knows, but in our discussions over these amounts and at the infrastructure committee, one key point came to mind was that when we were talking about how to participate and how to allocate funds, whether we're talking, I think Mr. Brake started out the conversation by talking about, you know, 1.4 million, 1.5. When we were discussing, you know, how the DDA was going to participate, Mr. Brake expressed to us his desire for us to concentrate our efforts on the base bid, being the factor that bids were going to expire in a very short period of time. And if we had to wait to figure out what the final numbers were going to be with the water feature, restrooms, and all of the remaining items, we would lose track. And he didn't want to have to divide money up between us and the city commission as a whole in terms of trying to get it done. So correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Brake, but my feeling was that you had expressed to us that you felt the most important factor to keep this project moving forward and on time was to get the base bid covered.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman. That is correct.
Okay. So subsequently, our first resolution or recommendation back from the infrastructure committee was for that specific amount, which was the 462 amount, which subsequently has changed. As Mr. Director Riley had said, there's an additional 66,000 on top of that. So that's where we are. Does anybody have any more questions here that they'd like to address to Mr. Brake, Mr. Twing? The consultants? Okay. Okay, so seeing none, Mr. Brake has before you in his letter, the end of his letter, there is two resolutions there. Tim, I don't know if you have a recommendation on the resolutions. Did you want them done separately?
It's actually one. It's actually one.
Actually, one resolution?
Right.
Okay.
Can we include the line in there on the, that it's contingent upon, the approval and execution from the city on the water feature?
You can add anything you would like and modify the resolution in any way you would like.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Here, Director Riley, what I would suggest is that you add that with that understanding as described in the memorandum dated February 23rd. Then the memorandum becomes an official part of the record.
Okay. Okay.
And Mr. Brake, what memorandum are you referring to?
My memo.
The memo.
Okay.
Right.
And
So if there's a question later on, years from now, if that's included in the motion, then the staff memorandum becomes an official record.
Okay. Director Keith.
Yeah, I just wanted to just confirm what the status of the restrooms would be then, and how that would be handled, and what infrastructure would not be installed for that or would be installed for that.
question.
Well, at this point, there's, speaking of additional costs, we have received an estimate to stub in the restrooms would be an additional $50,000 for the water and sewer alone for that. That becomes a question for the city commission. From what I have heard, there's not a willingness to spend $288,000. That was the bid for the bathroom, the way that it's configured. The outstanding question that I have is where's the placement of, I think there's an interest, and will end up building a bathroom, but where will it be? And what I mean is it in that location that the MKSK design, or what many have discussed is having a larger building somewhere close to the farmer's market. It would be it'd be a standalone building. It wouldn't be part of the farmer's market, but yet could accommodate, an even much larger crowd for, festivals, things like that. So that's a question that we will be posing to the city commission, and potentially that it could be a standalone. But if there is a strong desire to have that included in the park, that's an additional cost that we'll have to incur, that $50,000 just to stub out, for the sewer and water hookup. And at this point, I don't know what the final deliberation will be, but I have a feeling that there'll be a strong interest, but that could be, a standalone construction project that will be started and completed sometime in the following calendar year.
Okay, and then is there a plan for providing some level of restrooms while that is in planning or other efforts there? Is that what we would use the Henry Ford funds for? Would we utilize that to help pay for restrooms, or would there be no restrooms at all?
That is correct. So that also provides an opportunity. What Director Riley raised the issue of, if there were new sponsorships that, could we do fundraising to offset that? And so, not to make this conversation even more complicated, but it's, there's ways that this kind of a divide and conquer approach. I think there's an interest to having a bathroom, but I'm not sure how we're going to get there.
Yeah, and a little background there. And right, wrong, or indifferent, Shane Park doesn't have one, probably because of space constraints, and that would be something similar here. I know there's been some talk about the market adding a bathrooms on the west end, and I believe that the underground work has already been done for that, to make that a little bit easier where to occur. So I think it's kind of something that we look at. I hate to say, we're not kicking the can down the road, but I believe, Mr. Brake, correct me if I'm wrong, but the underground work will be done. Is that correct?
No, the stubbing out, that is an additional cost. that would have to incur, because that's what Director Keith was asking. What is that going to run? So that just to stub that, and I'll defer to either Chris Becker or Tom Anderson. I believe it's an additional $50,000 just for the stubbing out the water and the sewer for a restroom facility.
Do you, Mr. Brake, do you believe that'll be something that might be brought up at the commission meeting?
Oh, absolutely. I
Okay.
fully anticipate that.
That's what I
Yeah,
want.
because I think there's the cost is kind of providing some sticker shock, if you will. And that's where I'll defer to kind of my work experience of the park project that I worked, albeit, out of state, but built a much larger bathroom facility for a little over $400,000 as opposed to 288 for just a single, it's one unisex bathroom.
Okay.
You
Director
know,
Rosbeck.
yeah, Director Riley, I believe we talked about this at our last meeting, though, that was not going to be a feature we were thinking about in this phase of the park, that to Mr. Brake's comments, there were some other, albeit strategic areas that this could possibly go in and not have to be in the park.
Yep. And again, it wouldn't surprise me. I think there'll be some members of the commission that will bring this up. And
Absolutely.
and there'll be some talk about spending the $50,000 to plummet, if you will.
Yeah.
Whether it happens or not, who knows?
And I would anticipate this, that say, for instance, of, kicking that can down the road, even if they don't decide that at the March 8th meeting, shortly thereafter, that could be issued as a change work order. If
Gotcha.
we determine, because the bigger issue is, where is that bathroom going to be?
Correct.
And so if it's going to be at the farmer's market, you're talking about a standalone project that really has no bearing on this construction project.
Right.
Director Yazbek.
I'll make a motion to approve the proposed resolution included in Mr. Brake's memo and include the language of his memorandum as part of the motion.
We have a motion by Director Yazbek,
I second.
second by Director Rosbeck. Any discussion before I call for the vote? Anything anybody want to add? Okay. Then I will call for the vote at this time. Director Yazbek,
Yes.
Director Rosbeck,
Yes.
Director Keith,
Yes.
Director Riley,
Yes.
Director Lawan,
Yes.
Director Brake,
Yes.
and I will vote yes also, and that motion passes. I will ask Mr. Brake or Mr. Twing if you have any other business for the DDA today.
Nothing else.
Nothing else?
I feel
Director Riley, did you want?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Mr. Brake. I know we pushed this off, and you put a lot of work into explaining all this to us and took a lot of time. And I know over the weekend, you worked hard over the weekend on this. And I really appreciate it, because this thing is, just to show how crazy this thing is, from the time, just in the last day, there was another change with the contingency. So let's hope this is it. And let's hope, all I can say is this water feature better be something.
No, very much appreciated. It helped.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the feedback. This is important. In my beginning comments, this is a critical part of economic development, and to really add to the prosperity. I can tell you conversations that I have, and Mr. Fenton and myself had the privilege of touring Bamboo, and just the conversation of the park came up with Amanda and her cohorts there. So people are just great anticipation of the completion of the park. So.
Okay, and then I, just to close this out, I would ask Mr. Brake or one of the consultants, either one who wanted to chime in on it, just for our knowledge and for the public's knowledge who may be watching. We're hoping that this additional funding that's coming from the DDA is going to actually keep the project moving along and hopefully on schedule. I guess I look for a response. Can we expect that?
We need a,
You're right.
we need a little bit of direction, and Paul, I think you guys are really close to giving that to us for, so I can have Colasani O'Brien, Tom and his team to give us a recommendation for award. And then Plant Moran Cressa will forward our recommendation to award to the city based on the base bid contract and alternate number one.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
and then the city can approve it, and then we move forward, and we'll move forward as fast as possible.
That's what we'd like to hear.
And as you guys may or may not know, we're doing asbestos abatement inside the existing city hall and police station. So in the next couple of months, that beautiful grand old building can be on the ground. So that's really, if there's a phase one or phase two, phase one, let's get rid of the old, and then phase two, let's build the new.
Okay. Anybody else? Director Yazbek.
Yes, I'm going to make a motion to adjourn. Before I do, I also want to thank Mr. Brake and Mr. Twing and Mr. Fenton for their hard work. This is very exciting. There may be another exciting event coming up in the weeks to come. Mr. Brake is a huge West Virginia basketball fan. Mr. Riley is a huge University of Michigan fan. If those two ended up in the Final Four, we'll have some fun DDA meetings there. It's going to be really good. With that, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, I have a motion by Director Yazbek,
Second.
second by Director Rosbeck. Questions? Anything else? Okay. I'll call for the vote. Director Yazbek,
Yes.
Director Rosbeck,
Yes.
Director Brake,
Yes.
Director Lewan,
Yes.
Director Riley,
Yes.
Director Keith,
Yes.
and I will vote yes. We are now officially adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Have a good
Thanks,
night.
everyone.